I screeched to a stop in front of the museum, grabbed a jacketed pigeon, and jumped out. The birds had disappeared. Now I am a self-conscious person and not given to waving birds around on public streets at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I have a little of the falconer's paranoia about showing my birds to an unenlightened public, and a little of the prudent sportsman's more sensible aversion to shedding blood in front of people who think that meat is manufactured in the supermarket. If you pile these inhibitions on top of each other, you will realize how much I wanted that bird. It was a desire less connected to helping my friend than to a visceral hawk possession lust. Because my next act was to plant my feet on that sidewalk and wave that unlucky pigeon like a flag. Nothing. Again, yelling, "Ho! Ho, 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 hawk!" And she circled back into view over the expressway bridge, 200 feet overhead, setting her wings for a second and looking back over her shoulder. And I threw the pigeon as high as I could, yelling, "Ho!" She turned over on her back and came down on it like a hammer. It exploded and fell bleeding and stone dead into the museum's tiny lawn. She climbed, turned, and ripped past again, rolling the pigeon 10 feet along the ground, climbed, turned, and buzzed by 3 feet from my face, shrieking defiance. It was obvious that I wasn't going to pick her up easily. I think there were at least 10 horrified spectators standing by, but to this day I don't remember their faces. All my attention was on the hawk. My name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today I'm going to be discussing this book, A Rage for Falcons. Illustrated by Jonathan Wild and written by Stephen Bodio. I got this book at Coaz Books in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I say that because the back cover has the little about the author blurb, and it says, Stephen Bodio lives, writes, and hawks in central New Mexico. For many years, he has written the well-known Bodio's Review for Gray's Sporting Journal. His essays on sport and nature have appeared in many magazines, including Sports Afield and Smithsonian. He is the author of the books Good Guns, Aloft, and Querencia. The cover painting to this book was by John Baumlin, and the price, when this was originally sold, was $12.95. Now, the copyright information shows that this was copyright 1984, but that this is from the First Pruitt Publishing Company edition, April 1992. What printing within that, I'm not entirely certain, but this is at least from 92. One of the things I really, really love about Coaz is that I find a lot of books that have notes from the authors or have notes by readers in them. This book falls into the former group with a autograph, a signature by Stephen Bodio. It says, "For Lee, Steve Bodio, 94. A Rage for Falcons, the title page looks like this. And that hawk, that falcon, is just a beautiful image there. It was sold in very good condition. It's almost new. There's a really good image here of a falcon on a pheasant. This one is on page 116, almost near the end of the book. The main text of the book ends at page 128, but the coda ends on page 131. This is a really fun book to read. I don't remember how much I paid for it, but I know I got my money's worth for it. One, it's really cool to have a book that is autographed by a relatively local author. This was signed 30 years ago. It's now 2024. The book was written 40 years ago, which means I'm not even certain this guy is still alive, but he is very accomplished, and it seems to have been appreciated by other people. You usually don't, get a book signed unless you're interested enough in meeting the author that you go to one of their events or something like that. I mentioned this book in my 2023 year in review video, and I mention it because there's a number of books that I read, actually 3. The number is 3. I read 3 books last year, having finished one in January of 2024 about falconry and hawking. The first one I read was A Rage for Falcons, and this book was really fun to read. And then I read Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee. And that was my favorite fantasy story of 2023, and honestly, I think one of my favorite books ever. It's a short novella, only about 160 pages long. But it's really fascinating, and it touches on many of the themes of falconry that you see in this book, A Rage for Falcons. And there's some of the techniques that they really reference in Untethered Sky, though that one has more of a Persian look at it in a way. I don't want to say, maybe not necessarily Persian, but Arabian or Middle Eastern look at things, which I got the impression it was trying to set itself as a fantasy setting akin to the Middle East. Falconry is one of those traditions from ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, ancient Mesopotamia, with hawking, falconry in the art. And so this is one of those ancient practices. And what Stephen Bodio really focuses on is describing his experiences with it as a very skilled falconer, as well as just the kinds of falconry and hawking you do in the Southwest United States. He gives, in the first couple chapters, a description of the kinds of birds you find, as well as the personalities that you find in hawks as well. There's a really funny moment here. The kestrel is a 5-ounce helicoptering cow pasture bug hawk, gaudy as a songbird. It is the commonest North American raptor, as likely to inhabit a city attic as an abandoned woodpecker hole in the country. Although of perfect falcon outline, with delicate pointed wings and a notched bill, it is mostly used in falconry as a sort of training bird. It can be tamed in a week and flown prettily to the lure, like some combination of model airplane and butterfly. But it seems to lose what little savagery it possesses in the ease of domestic life. I have known only 2 kestrels that took any quarry at all, and only one that repeated the feat. Kestrels used to be called sparrowhawks, another instance of the Puritans' ineptitude in recognizing and naming wild animals. And then there's a footnote here attached to the picture on this page, and it says, "My illustrator, John Wilde, takes exception to this statement. His kestrel was a consistent game hawk, and he has known others that were." And this is that image. And so, you see that beautiful artwork. You see it's almost like a joking tone in that footnote. I have this opinion about whether kestrels are game hawks, but my illustrator has a different opinion. It's a very funny footnote. And it's a very informative voice that this author uses. There's a page there's a bit a few pages later that says that the peregrine is still the falcon. It is the first bird to be so called, the falcon gentle of the Middle Ages. It is perhaps the handsomest of the falcons. Its build is compact and athletic, its plumage a hard, almost shiny deep blue. Its head is marked with a helmet-like cap of black. or deep slate gray. The whole effect is set off by a creamy white on the throat and bright yellow around the eyes and bill and on the huge bird-killing feet. The peregrine was called falcon gentle, as in gentleman and commoner, not in relation to its temperament. But it is in every way a gentle bird compared to the irascible prairie or the volatile gyr. An adult-caught peregrine will seem shy, but cool and even phlegmatic. She will more likely ignore the falconer than scream at him in rage. It is a little too tempting to wonder if the polite, ladylike composure of the peregrine wasn't at least as important to its popularity among the stiff upper lip English falconers as it were its stunning stoops at red grouse. But am I the only heretic to wonder if, except for this ability, the peregrine wouldn't be a little, well, stuffy compared to the fiery gyr? And he does touch on the spread of DDT. Remember, this book was written in 1984, and so for him to have this discussion about falcons, especially in the southwest New Mexico, this is a time where I don't even think bald eagles had returned to New Mexico. And bald eagles and birds of prey in general are sacred. They're important to the Puebloans who call New Mexico home. I'm finding eagles.org online. It says the bald eagle was on the verge of extinction when the federal government declared it endangered in 1978 under the Endangered Species Act. Today, there are more than 9,800 nesting male-female pairs across the USA. So, actually, in Washington, D.C., there's only one, though it is a relatively small area. You know, bald eagles were heavily affected by DDT, and other falcons and birds of prey were as well. So for him to be writing in 1984 has to be influenced in part by the way that toxin affected birds. He says on page 58, so why do so many contemporary falconers bother with such monsters? Part of the reason, sadly, is bureaucratic. Constantly catching and releasing hawks, while legal, generates massive paperwork and tends to make governmental monitors suspicious. But there are also positive reasons to fly an ES. Even Bert admitted that if you could persevere through your baby's prolonged infancy, you would have a superior hawk. ESs are fearless and almost impossible to lose. Since they don't know what constitutes normal hawk fare, they will fly well against huge or unpalatable prey, should that be your desire. And they like you. There's some really beautiful artwork in here. There's some really fun descriptions of falconry. Here's a good example of one of those pieces of art. A man catching a bird on the wing. I showed earlier that, the falcon on the pheasant or the grouse or whatever that was. It's a very fun book. The artwork enhances it, and the voice of the author is fun to read, and it's why I opened with that kind of ecstatic moment where he's trying to catch a bird, and the hawk in that event, that scene, he ends up not being able to catch it, but someone else catches it for him. He says that he put nooses on the pigeon, but realized he only put nooses on the pigeon's back. And so when the pigeon is actually eaten by the bird, all the nooses are on the ground and it's eating the belly. And so he says that several days later, when his friend and a better bird catcher than he caught it, it had nooses on both the belly and the back. And it had nooses on the belly because of the feedback from that event where he's waving a pigeon around the town and horrifying onlookers. It's just a funny story, and I love that he included it. I don't know why falcons and hawks are on my mind so much lately, but they are, and I'm hoping to look for more. In fact, I kind of know one reason. In the past, I've mentioned that I work outdoor recreation, and one of my customers this year, an airman, he expressed the interest in doing falconry. So he's stuck at this Air Force base for 4 years, and he said, during that time, I might as well try and apprentice upstate, maybe find someone in Socorro or Albuquerque or Santa Fe that can teach him how to take care of hawks and falcons so that he can then try to learn falconry and hawking. And this is something he just is passionate about that subject. He doesn't have any personal experience, but because he's in a state with a reputation for it, he's taking that opportunity while he's here. And so, that story, and then this book, and H is for Hawk, and Untethered Sky, all of these things came together in 2023. I have an interest in birds, and that kind of focused it in one direction. So, anyway, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.